Why has the United States failed to defeat Iran for nearly half a century? In 1979, the Iranian Revolution changed the Middle East forever. A country long aligned with Western powers broke away and built a new political order based on ideological independence and strategic autonomy. Since then, Iran has faced continuous external pressure, sweeping economic sanctions, international isolation, cyber attacks, targeted assassinations, and repeated military threats. Despite all of this, the Islamic Republic has endured for more than 4 decades. It has not only survived, it has built one of the most sophisticated asymmetric warfare systems in the region. Today, the same difficult question returns. Why has the world's most powerful military been unable to decisively defeat Iran? And why might that remain true in the future? This is context. To understand why Iran is so difficult to defeat, you have to start with geography. Iran occupies one of the most strategically valuable and hostile positions on the planet. It sits at the intersection of the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Caspian Sea, sharing land borders with 7 countries. Internally, it is a natural fortress, ringed by massive mountain ranges that make any land invasion a logistical nightmare. Externally, its true strategic power comes from controlling the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of global seaborne oil trade passes through this narrow choke point every single day. This is not just an energy route, it is a critical artery of the global economy. Any sustained disruption here would immediately trigger a spike in oil prices, cascading effects on inflation worldwide, and severe pressure on Asian economies, including China, Iran's most critical economic lifeline. Iran does not need to close the strait permanently to weaponize it. Even the credible threat of disruption through anti-ship missiles, naval mines, fast attack boats, or drone swarms forces planners in Washington to calculate a much higher cost for any military campaign. Because in a world already dealing with tight energy markets, even a short-term closure could cause economic and political damage far beyond the Middle East. This is the quiet power of geography. It gives Iran a form of deterrence that does not rely on matching America's military technology, but on holding a permanent economic vulnerability of the global system. And Iran has spent decades building its military doctrine explicitly around this geographic reality. Geography, however, is only the foundation. So how has Iran survived 4 decades of pressure that would have broken most other nations? The answer begins in 1979. The modern Iranian system was born in crisis. The revolution overthrew the Shah, a close American ally, and replaced him with a government openly hostile to Western influence in the region. Diplomatic relations collapsed almost immediately. What followed was a rapid sequence of confrontation: the hostage crisis, international isolation, and sweeping sanctions. Then came war. In 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, with support from several regional powers and tacit Western backing, invaded Iran. Iran suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties, watched entire cities turned to rubble, and endured chemical weapons attacks with little international reaction. The country survived, but the war left a permanent strategic mark. Iranian leaders drew a clear and lasting conclusion. In a hostile international environment, they could rely on no one except themselves. International law, alliances, and diplomacy would always be secondary to raw power and self-reliance. That lesson became the bedrock of Iranian strategic thinking for the next 40 years. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the United States progressively expanded sanctions designed to isolate Iran economically and technologically. Iranian banks were cut off from the global financial system, oil exports were heavily restricted, and international companies largely avoided the country. The pressure was immense, yet rather than collapsing, Iran adapted by turning its isolation into a deliberate military and economic strategy. Because importing weapons was nearly impossible, it built a domestic military-industrial complex from scratch. Because maintaining a modern air force under sanctions was unrealistic, it invested heavily in precision missile production, the direct corporate answer to the Scuds that terrorized their cities in the 1980s. It pioneered cheap, mass-produced drone technology long before it became a global standard, and moved its critical infrastructure into deep underground facilities. Tehran developed what it called a resistance economy, a sophisticated gray market network of ghost fleets, front companies, and regional smuggling routes designed to bypass Western financial chokeholds. Then came 2015. The JCPOA briefly opened a path toward de-escalation. Iran accepted limitations on its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. While Western diplomats viewed it as a step toward reintegration, hardliners in Tehran saw it as a temporary tactical truce. When the United States unilaterally withdrew in 2018 and launched its maximum pressure campaign, those hardliners were vindicated. Iran's currency collapsed, inflation exploded, and oil exports plummeted. Yet the systemic collapse Washington had anticipated never arrived. Instead, the American withdrawal permanently weakened the political influence of Iranian moderates and strengthened the most radical military factions, particularly within the Revolutionary Guard. By enduring decades of sanctions, covert attacks, and economic warfare without collapsing, Iran demonstrated the structural limits of Western leverage. When pressure becomes permanent and open-ended, it stops functioning as an effective punishment. It simply becomes the new environment to which the target state adapts. By adapting to permanent pressure, Iran didn't build a better army. It built a completely different kind of power. So what does this different kind of power actually look like? Iran rejected conventional military competition from the start. It understood a direct confrontation with America could not be won. Instead, Iranian strategists studied what happened to regimes that tried. They watched Iraq's centralized military collapse under American shock and awe in 2003. They saw Muammar Gaddafi's Libya fall after he gave up his weapons of mass destruction. They observed Syria fragment under foreign intervention. The conclusion was clear. States that cannot impose serious costs on their adversaries become vulnerable to regime change. From this, Iran built a security doctrine centered entirely on cost imposition. This strategy works on two levels. Externally, Iran developed the axis of resistance, a network of proxy and allied groups including Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. These actors extend Iranian reach across the region and ensure that any direct conflict with Tehran would quickly become a multi-front war. Complementing this is a deliberate technological and economic asymmetry. Iran mastered the use of cheap systems to force expensive countermeasures. Low-cost drones and missiles can overwhelm high-value air defenses, creating a mismatch where the defender spends far more than the attacker. Internally, Iran transformed its territory into a hardened fortress. Every critical facility, military, nuclear command centers, is either dispersed, mobile, or buried. The Persian Gulf itself becomes a defensive asset. Iran's forces are optimized for swarm tactics and coastal defense in confined waters, not for global power projection. The message is clear: invade Iran, and every kilometer becomes a killing ground. This is where the Iranian strategy becomes strategically decisive. The United States maintains overwhelming military superiority. American air power could devastate Iranian infrastructure, naval forces could blockade the coast, special operations could strike deep into the country. But the aftermath is where the calculation breaks down. Occupying a country 4 times larger than Iraq, with rugged mountainous terrain, 90 million people, and deep nationalist sentiment would require years of commitment and trillions in costs. A prolonged insurgency would be almost certain. Regional destabilization would spread across the Middle East. And the economic consequences, closure of Hormuz, oil price spikes, global energy crisis, would ripple through every economy dependent on Middle Eastern oil. American policymakers know this, and that knowledge changes the entire equation. Iran was never trying to become stronger than the United States. It was trying to become too costly to destroy. And after more than 4 decades of sanctions, covert operations, military pressure, and isolation, the Islamic Republic still stands. Not because it defeated the West, but because it learned how to survive it. This is context.